Blind nanny is forced to leave the millionaire's daughter. The girl's stepmother was cruel. Fine rain of Manchester streamed down the mansion windows like held-back tears, tracing tortuous paths that no one inside seemed to notice. It was a Sunday afternoon, one of those when time seems to halt between lunch and dinner, and the Wellington household breathed an uncomfortable silence, heavy like the air before a storm. Ronald was in the library, pretending to read financial reports, while his mind wandered through far less productive territories. At 43, the businessman had built an empire of concrete and steel, erecting skyscrapers that changed the city's skyline. But there, seated in his English leather armchair surrounded by books he never read and framed certificates attesting to successes that no longer thrilled him, Ronald felt like an architect incapable of drawing the blueprint for his own happiness. Outside, in the garden covered by the pergola he himself had commissioned the previous year, Claire was sitting in her favorite spot, the wooden bench next to the sensory herb garden. The 12-year-old girl had her fingers immersed in the damp earth, identifying by touch and smell each of the herbs Martha had planted with her. Rosemary, mint, basil, sage. Each plant had a different texture, a unique aroma, a particular story Martha had told her with that soft, steady voice. Claire didn't see the world with her eyes, but she understood it in ways few could imagine. She was born prematurely, on an emergency night that had cost her mother, Eliza, her life. The lack of oxygen during childbirth had irreversibly damaged her optic nerve, but Claire didn't feel incomplete, not until she met people who made her feel that way. Inside the house, in the gourmet kitchen that looked more like a decoration magazine set than a daily use space, Olivia was organizing the dishes in the cupboard for the third time, not because they were disorganized, but because she needed to keep her hands busy to avoid thinking. At 36, with a beauty meticulously maintained between aesthetic treatments and Pilates studios, Olivia Wellington prided herself on having won one of Manchester's most coveted bachelors. But what she hadn't calculated when she accepted the marriage proposal 2 years ago was that marrying Ronald also meant taking on a stepdaughter she simply couldn't understand. Claire was an enigma that deeply irritated her. The girl didn't cry when she got hurt, didn't complain when she was thwarted, didn't show gratitude for the expensive clothes Olivia bought for her. She lived in her own inaccessible world, and this made Olivia feel even more out of place in that immense house that should have been her kingdom. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the entrance hall, breaking the lethargy of that afternoon. Ronald looked up from the report he wasn't reading. Olivia closed the cupboard door with more force than she intended. Claire lifted her face towards the sound, a faint smile appearing on her lips. It was Sunday. Was Martha arriving for her weekly day off? No. Martha had Wednesdays off. So who could it be? The housekeeper, Mrs. Nelson, a 60-year-old woman who had worked in the house since before Claire was born, crossed the hallway and opened the door. Outside, with a small suitcase and a calm smile, stood Martha Adams. Martha was 35, though she looked younger. Her face had that serenity of someone who had made peace with life, despite all its adversities. Blind since the age of 7, a victim of a poorly treated childhood infection, Martha had learned early on to navigate the world with an autonomy that impressed everyone. She wore dark glasses even indoors, not out of necessity, but because people seemed to feel more comfortable that way without having to face her unseeing eyes. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Nelson," Martha said, with that voice that always seemed to be smiling. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I know it's my day off today, but I brought some new materials for Claire, some audiobooks I got from the specialized library and a Braille marking kit she'll love." Mrs. Nelson smiled, fond of the young woman who had brought so much light into little Claire's life. "Nonsense, dear. Come in. Come in. Claire's outside in the garden. She must be waiting for you, as always." Martha entered with the familiarity of someone who already knew every inch of that house. She didn't need a cane inside. She had already memorized the exact number of steps between the front door and each room, the changing floor texture between the hall and the living room, the slight elevation that marked the passage to the bedroom corridor. It was her superpower, as she told Claire, transforming the world into a mental map as detailed as any architectural blueprint. Olivia appeared in the kitchen exactly as Martha passed through the hallway. The encounter was inevitable and uncomfortable, as always. "Martha," Olivia said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I didn't know you were coming today. I thought it was your day off." "It is, Mrs. Olivia," Martha replied, polite as ever. "But I brought some things for Claire. I'll just deliver them and then I'll leave, don't worry." "It's not worry," Olivia lied, adjusting her blonde hair with a nervous gesture. "It's just that Claire needs to learn not to depend so much on you. After all, you won't be here forever." The silence that followed was dense. Martha maintained her serene expression, but something tightened in her chest. It wasn't the first time Olivia had let this kind of comment slip, always disguised as maternal concern, always laden with subtle poison. "My job is precisely to teach Claire to be independent, Mrs. Olivia," Martha replied, maintaining a respectful tone. "Every technique I teach her, every skill we develop together, is so that she needs me less and less, or anyone else." Olivia didn't respond. She just turned and went back to the kitchen, leaving an expensive perfume and attention Martha knew well hanging in the air. There was something about that woman that went beyond the difficulty of dealing with a stepdaughter with a disability. It was something deeper, more personal. Martha felt it, though she couldn't see it. Outside, Claire had already sensed Martha's presence, not by the sound of her footsteps, for Martha moved with an almost feline lightness, but by the scent. Martha always wore the same soft lavender perfume, and Claire would recognize it anywhere. "My lighthouse!" Claire exclaimed, getting up from the bench and walking towards the voice that hadn't yet spoken. "I knew it was you. I smelled you from afar." Martha smiled, extending her arms to receive the girl's warm embrace. "Hi, my little star. How are you? Did you take good care of our garden?" "Yes, I did. The basil is huge, and the rosemary is blooming. You have to smell it." The two sat on the bench, and for a few minutes the world was reduced to that small garden universe. Martha opened her suitcase and began to show Claire the new materials. They were audio-described books, narrated with such richness of detail that it allowed Claire to mentally visualize each scene, each character, each setting. There was also an adapted board game with textures and reliefs that allowed Claire to play alone or with others. "Martha," Claire said suddenly, becoming serious, "are you going to leave one day?" The question caught Martha by surprise. "Why are you asking that now?" "Because I heard Olivia talking to my dad the other day. She said I'm becoming too dependent on you, that it's not healthy, that you should leave soon before I suffer more." Martha felt her heart clench. She held Claire's hands in hers. "Claire, look at me. Listen carefully. You are not dependent on me. You are learning, you are growing, you are becoming stronger every day. And do you know why? Because you are brave, intelligent, and capable. I am just a guide. But the path, you are the one who makes it." "But I don't want you to leave," Claire said, her voice choked. "You understand me, you don't pity me, you don't treat me like I'm made of glass. And I'm not going anywhere, not as long as you need me. But Claire, listen closely to what I'm going to tell you. You need to prepare for the day I'm not here. Not because I'm leaving, but because you will grow up. You will have your own life, your own achievements. And on that day, you will be grateful for having learned to walk alone." Claire nodded, swallowing the tears that threatened to fall. Martha always knew what to say, always found the right words to turn fear into courage. Inside the library, Ronald had abandoned any pretense of working. He watched the scene between Martha and Claire through the window, and something in his chest churned. He knew that bond recognized in it something he himself couldn't offer his daughter: presence, attention, understanding. Ronald loved Claire, of that there was no doubt. But love wasn't enough when that love was accompanied by guilt, remorse, a pain he had never fully processed. Every time he looked at his daughter, he saw Eliza. He saw the emergency childbirth, he saw the doctors rushing, he saw the moment when everything changed forever. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't separate the love he felt for Claire from the pain he felt for Eliza's loss. It was Olivia who pulled him out of that state of paralysis 2 years ago. She appeared in his life like a whirlwind of energy, beauty, and practicality. She asked no questions about the past, demanded no explanations for his silences. She offered simplicity where there was complexity, lightness where there was weight, and Ronald clung to it like a shipwreck survivor clings to a plank. But marrying Olivia also meant creating a new dynamic in the house, and Ronald was not prepared for the conflicts that would come. Olivia tried, in her own way, to be a maternal figure for Claire, but her form of love was different. It was based on rules, on structure, on control. And Claire, accustomed to the emotional freedom Eliza had given her in her early years and that Martha now cultivated, withdrew more and more. Ronald knew something needed to change, but he didn't know what or how. Night fell silently over Manchester, bringing with it the city's characteristic dry cold. Martha had left a few hours ago, but not before having dinner with Claire and reviewing the next week's schedule with her. There would be orientation and mobility classes on Tuesday, film audio description sessions on Thursday, and on Saturday the urban mobility program that Claire loved so much. Claire was already in her room when Olivia went up to say goodnight. The girl was sitting on her bed, her fingers gliding over a braille book Martha had left. "Claire," Olivia said, sitting on the edge of the bed, "we need to talk." Claire stopped reading, turning her face towards her stepmother. "About what?" "About Martha," Olivia said, choosing her words carefully. "I know you like her a lot, and I understand that, but I think you're getting too attached, and that's not good for you." "Why isn't it good?" Claire asked, her voice laden with a defensiveness Olivia didn't expect. "Because you need to learn to trust other people too. Me, for example. I'm your mother now, Claire. Or at least I'm trying to be." "You're not my mother," Claire said, with a frankness that cut the air like a blade. "My mother is gone, and Martha isn't trying to be my mother. She's teaching me to be myself." Olivia felt her face flush. It wasn't anger exactly, but a mixture of frustration, hurt, and something she didn't want to admit. Envy. Envy of Martha, who achieved in minutes what she couldn't in years. The connection, the complicity, the trust. "I'm just trying to protect you, Claire," Olivia said, her voice softer now. "I don't want you to suffer when Martha leaves." "But she's not leaving," Claire insisted. "She promised." Olivia didn't respond. She got up from the bed, gave Claire a cold kiss on the forehead, and left the room, closing the door with excessive care, as if trying to contain something that threatened to explode. In the hallway, she found Ronald coming up the stairs. He was coming from yet another meeting that had run late, another excuse not to come home early. "Is she asleep yet?" Ronald asked. "Almost," Olivia replied, crossing her arms. "Ronald, we need to talk about Martha." "What about Martha?" "She's creating an emotional dependency in Claire. Don't you think it's strange that our daughter prefers to spend time with the nanny than with us?" Ronald sighed, tired. "Olivia, Martha isn't just a nanny. She's a qualified professional, recommended by the city's best inclusion school. And more than that, she understands Claire in a way that we can't." "And doesn't that bother you?" Olivia asked, raising her voice. "Doesn't it bother you that a stranger has more influence over your daughter than you do?" "Martha isn't a stranger," Ronald said, trying to stay calm, "and she's doing an excellent job. Claire is more independent, more confident, happier, more distant from us," Olivia added bitterly. Ronald had no answer to that, because deep down Olivia was right. Claire was indeed distancing herself from them, but not because of Martha. She was distancing herself because they had never truly grown close. That night, each inhabitant of the Wellington mansion slept carrying their own burdens. Ronald with the guilt of his absence, Olivia with the frustration of her inadequacy, Claire with the fear of losing the only person who made her feel complete, and Martha, in her small apartment in the Mayfair district a few miles away, held an old photograph in her hands. In it, two women smiled at the camera at a children's inclusion event. One of them was Martha, younger with longer hair. The other was Eliza Wellington, a few months pregnant, radiant. Martha ran her fingers over the image, as if she could feel the texture of the past. There were things Ronald didn't know, things Olivia suspected, things Claire deserved to discover. But everything had its time. And time, Martha knew well, was an architect far wiser than any human being. The week that followed was marked by small tensions accumulating like clouds before a storm. Claire continued her routine with Martha, learning to use public transport safely, memorizing routes, identifying auditory and tactile landmarks. On Saturday, she participated in the urban mobility program and came home more animated than ever. "Dad," Claire said during dinner, with rare enthusiasm, "today I learned how to use the adapted transport app. Do you know what that means? I'll be able to go to school alone soon." Ronald smiled, genuinely proud. "That's great, daughter, but let's take it easy, okay? One step at a time." "But I'm ready," Claire insisted. "Martha said I have all the conditions. I just need to practice a little more and—" "Martha said," Olivia interrupted, with a tone that didn't go unnoticed. "Martha always says a lot, doesn't she?" The atmosphere at the table changed instantly. Claire became quiet, her fingers gripping her fork. Ronald shot a warning glance at Olivia, who averted her eyes. "I just think," Olivia continued more cautiously now, "that certain decisions should be made by us, her, parents, and not by the nanny." "Martha isn't just a nanny," Claire said, her voice firm. "She's my instructor, my guide, my friend." "She's an employee," Olivia corrected, with a coldness that made the air in the dining room freeze. Claire got up from the table, knocking her napkin to the floor. "May I be excused? I'm not hungry." Ronald nodded, defeated, as Claire walked precisely to the stairs, climbing the steps she knew by heart. When the bedroom door closed upstairs, Olivia sighed. "Did you see? She's incapable of having a conversation without turning Martha into a saint." "And you're incapable of having a conversation without attacking Martha," Ronald replied, tired. "Olivia, what's your problem with her? The woman is doing an exceptional job with Claire." Olivia remained silent for a long moment, stirring her food without eating. "It's not about her work, Ronald. It's about what she represents." "And what does she represent?" "Everything I can't be," Olivia admitted, with rare vulnerability. "She comes in here, spends a few hours a day with Claire, and achieves a connection I can't even in years. She's blind, Ronald, just like Claire, and yet she's more of a mother to her than I'll ever be." Ronald was surprised by his wife's sincerity. It was the first time Olivia had admitted her feelings without filters, without masks. "Olivia," he said gently, "Martha isn't trying to be Claire's mother. She's just being who she is. A person who understands disability because she lives with it. That doesn't diminish you." "But it excludes me," Olivia said, her eyes watering. "And I don't know how to compete with that." "It's not about competition," Ronald said, reaching out to touch her hand. "It's about finding your own way to connect with her." But even as he said those words, Ronald knew he was being hypocritical, because he himself hadn't found his way to connect with Claire. He hid behind work, meetings, trips. He used Martha as a bridge, but never fully crossed that bridge himself. That night, as the house plunged into silence, Olivia couldn't sleep. She got out of bed, went down to the kitchen, and made some tea. As she waited for the water to boil, her eyes fell upon a pile of clothes Mrs. Nelson had set aside for laundry. Among them was a jacket of Martha's that she had forgotten on her last visit. Olivia picked up the jacket, feeling the texture of the simple fabric, so different from the clothes she wore, and that's when she felt something in the pocket. An envelope. Her hand hesitated for a moment, conscience battling curiosity. But curiosity won. Inside the envelope were old letters, dated over 10 years ago. They were correspondences between Martha and Eliza. Olivia sat at the kitchen table, her heart pounding, and began to read in the soft light of the chandelier. The letters revealed a deep friendship between the two women. Eliza wrote about her pregnancy, her fears, her hopes. Martha responded with words of encouragement, sharing her own experience of living without sight, offering advice, suggesting resources. One letter in particular caught Olivia's attention. It was from Eliza, written a few months before Claire was born. "Dear Martha, the doctors confirmed today that my baby will be born visually impaired. I cried a lot, I won't lie. But then I remembered you, your strength, your independence, everything you taught me about seeing the world in other ways. And then I stopped crying and started planning. I want my daughter to grow up as you grew up, with pride, with autonomy, with courage. And one day when she's old enough, I want you two to meet. because you will be a living example that she can be anything she wants to be." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. Martha hadn't entered Claire's life by chance. She had been chosen, promised, destined. But why had Martha never told them this? Why had she hidden her connection with Eliza? The questions multiplied in Olivia's mind, each one more disturbing than the last. And at that moment, alone in the lit kitchen, holding letters that weren't hers, Olivia made a decision that would change the course of all lives in that house. She needed to discover the truth about Martha Adams, and when she did, she would use that truth in whatever way she deemed necessary. Because in the silent power game unfolding in that mansion, Olivia was determined not to be the loser. And so, as Manchester slept under its blanket of cold and fog, the foundations of that family began to crack, imperceptibly, preparing the ground for what was to come. Dawn arrived timidly over Manchester, with that grey light that seemed more like an unfulfilled promise of sun. Olivia hadn't slept a wink all night. She had remained sitting on the bed, the letters scattered across the duvet like pieces of a puzzle she was determined to assemble. Ronald slept beside her, oblivious to the storm brewing in his wife's mind. When the alarm clock rang at 6 in the morning, Olivia was already up, showered, made up, and dressed with a determination that was reflected in every precise movement. She waited for Ronald to wake up, have his coffee in a hurry as usual, and leave for another day at the office before executing her plan. At 8 o'clock, she rang the doorbell of Martha's apartment in Mayfair. It was an old building, well maintained but without luxuries, the kind of construction that had history in its walls. Martha answered the intercom with surprise in her voice. "Mrs. Olivia, is that you?" "Yes, Martha, I need to talk to you. It's important." There was a pause. Martha certainly didn't expect that visit. "Of course you can come up. Apartment 203. Martha's apartment was small but impeccably organized. Every object had its exact place, and Olivia immediately noticed that this wasn't just a matter of order but of necessity. Martha needed to know where everything was to navigate the space autonomously. "Please, have a seat," Martha said, pointing to the sofa with impressive precision. "Can I offer you some coffee? I just made some." "No, thank you," Olivia replied, sitting down. She was nervous but tried to hide it. "I came here because I found something last night. Something you left in your jacket." Martha's face changed imperceptibly. "The envelope," she said, not as a question but as an acknowledgement. "Yes, the envelope with the letters between you and Eliza Wellington." Martha nodded slowly, her hands clasped in her lap. "So you know. I know you were friends. I know Eliza knew Claire would be born visually impaired. I know she wanted you two to meet one day." Olivia paused, letting the words gain weight. "What I don't know is why you never told Ronald about this. Why did you hide your connection with Claire's mother?" Martha remained silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was laden with long-suppressed emotion. "Because I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid he would think I was taking advantage of the situation. Afraid he would think I wanted to replace Eliza in some way. When I saw the advertisement looking for a caregiver for Claire 3 years ago, I immediately knew it was my calling. Eliza made me promise that I would take care of her daughter if anything happened. And it did." "But you should have told him," Olivia insisted. "You should have been honest from the start." "I know," Martha said, her voice breaking slightly. "But over time it became increasingly difficult. How was I supposed to approach Ronald after months of working there and say, 'Oh, by the way, I knew. Your late wife?' It would seem like a lie. It would seem like manipulation." "And isn't it?" Olivia asked incisively. Martha raised her face towards Olivia, even though she couldn't see her. "No, Mrs. Olivia, it is not. All I did was honor a promise. Eliza asked me to be a light in Claire's life if she ever needed it, and I am being that. Not for Eliza's memory, but for Claire herself. Because that girl deserves to have someone who believes in her, who challenges her, who treats her like the incredible person she is." Olivia felt something stir in her chest. It wasn't anger exactly. It was a mixture of admiration and resentment, of understanding and jealousy. "And you think we don't do that? Ronald and I?" "I think," Martha said, with a gentleness that somehow hurt more than any criticism, that you love Claire. But you love her with fear, with guilt, with the pain of the past. And Claire feels that. She feels that you see her as fragile, as incomplete, as someone who needs to be protected from the world. I see her as someone who needs to conquer the world. Martha's words echoed in the small apartment, honest and sharp. Olivia blinked rapidly, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. She didn't want to cry there, not in front of Martha. "What do you want from us, Martha?" Olivia asked, her voice softer now. "What do you really want?" "I want Claire to have the chance to be happy, to be free, to be everything she can be." Martha paused. "And I want you to have the chance to truly know her. Because if you don't do that soon, one day she will grow up and you will realize that you let the best years of her life pass by." Olivia stood up, picking up her purse. "I'm going to tell Ronald about you and Eliza, about the letters, about everything." "I know you will," Martha said, also standing up. "And that's fine. Perhaps it's even better this way. I don't like living with secrets." At the door, Olivia stopped and turned. "You really love her, don't you?" "Claire." Martha smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "As if she were my own daughter." And it was that answer that hurt Olivia the most, because she herself wasn't sure if she could say the same. That afternoon, when Ronald arrived home from work earlier than usual, he found Olivia waiting for him in the library. There was a tension in the air that he recognized immediately. "Did something happen?" he asked, taking off his jacket. "Sit down, Ronald. I need to tell you something about Martha." For the next 30 minutes, Olivia told him everything. She showed him the letters, explained about the friendship between Martha and Eliza, about the promise, about how Martha had intentionally applied to be Claire's caregiver. Ronald listened in silence, his face growing paler and paler. When Olivia finished, he just stared at the letters scattered across the mahogany table, not touching them, as if they were explosives about to detonate. "I didn't know," was all he could say. "I had no idea Eliza knew Martha." "She never told you?" Eliza had many friends, many projects. She was active in the inclusion community, always participating in events, lectures. Ronald ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration Olivia knew well. "But she never specifically mentioned Martha, or if she did, I wasn't paying attention. And now? What are you going to do?" Ronald remained silent, processing. Part of him felt betrayed, deceived. Martha had omitted important information, had cultivated a relationship with his daughter based on premises he was unaware of. But another part, the part that watched Claire flourishing every day, the part that saw in his daughter a confidence and joy that hadn't existed before, that part hesitated. "I need to talk to her," he finally said. "I need to hear it from her own mouth." "I already did," Olivia said. "I went there this morning." Ronald looked at his wife, surprised. "You went to her apartment?" "I did. And she admitted everything. She said she knew Eliza, that she promised to take care of Claire, that she intentionally applied for the position." Olivia paused. "But she also said something that made me think." "What?" "That we love Claire with fear, with guilt, that we treat her as if she were too fragile for the world." The words hit Ronald like a punch to the stomach, because he knew deep down that they were true. Ever since Claire was born, he had seen her through the filter of tragedy. The daughter who had cost her mother's life, the girl who was born without sight, the child he hadn't known how to save. "Maybe she's right," Ronald admitted, with an honesty that surprised him. "Maybe I spent so much time afraid of losing her that I forgot to truly have her." Olivia sat beside her husband, touching his hand. It was a rare gesture between them lately, and Ronald squeezed her fingers, grateful for the connection. "What do we do now?" Olivia asked. "I don't know," Ronald replied. "But I think before deciding anything about Martha, I need to talk to Claire, really talk, without shields, without excuses." That night after dinner, Ronald went up to his daughter's room. He knocked lightly on the door and entered when Claire said he could. The girl was sitting on her bed, headphones on, listening to one of the audiobooks Martha had brought. "Dad?" Claire said, taking off her headphones. "Did something happen?" No, everything's fine. I just wanted to talk to you. Can I sit down? Of course. Ronald sat on the edge of the bed, searching for the right words. He wasn't good at this, never had been. With engineering projects, with business negotiations, he was excellent. But with emotions, with vulnerability, with genuine human connection, he had always felt awkward. Claire, I wanted to apologize, he began, surprising himself. Claire turned her face towards her father, confused. Apologize for what? For not having been present, for having hidden behind work all these years, for having let other people take care of you while I pretended I was building a better future for us. Claire remained silent, processing. Dad, I know you work a lot. I understand. But you shouldn't have to understand, Claire. You're a child. You should be able to count on me, not understand my absence. I do count on you, Claire said with a conviction that squeezed Ronald's heart. But you shouldn't count on Martha more than on me. She told me, Olivia told me that you call Martha your lighthouse. Claire blushed slightly, but didn't deny it. It's because she guides me. She shows me the way when I get lost. She makes me believe that I can do things I thought were impossible. And me? Ronald asked, his voice breaking. What am I to you? Claire thought for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but honest. You're my dad and I love you, but sometimes I feel like you're afraid of me, as if I'm going to break at any moment. Ronald felt tears burn his eyes. I'm not afraid of you, daughter. I'm afraid of losing you, like I lost your mother. It was the first time Ronald had spoken about Eliza with Claire so directly. Normally he avoided the subject, deflected when the girl asked, hid behind vague answers and changes of topic. You never talk about her, Claire said, her voice also choked now. About my mother. It's as if she never existed. I do talk about her, it just hurts so much, Claire. It hurts to remember. It hurts to miss her. It hurts to know she's not here to see the incredible person you're becoming. Martha told me about her, Claire said softly. She said she met her at an event many years ago, that my mother was special. So Claire knew, or at least knew part of the story. Ronald realized that Martha had been more honest with Claire than he had imagined. She really was special, Ronald said, his voice full of longing. Your mother was... She was pure light, Claire. She lit up any room she entered. She was passionate about just causes, fought with all her strength for a more inclusive, fairer world. He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat. When we found out you would be born visually impaired, she didn't cry from sadness. She cried from determination. She said you would be proof that limitations are just social constructs. Was she right? Claire asked hopefully. She was right, Ronald confirmed, taking his daughter's hand in his. And I'm so sorry it took me so long to believe that too. Father and daughter stayed like that in silence, just holding each other's hands. It was a moment of genuine connection that hadn't happened in years, perhaps never had happened with such depth. Dad, Claire said after a while, Olivia's going to send Martha away, isn't she? Ronald was startled by the question. Why do you think that? Because I hear things. I hear Olivia talking to you about me, about Martha. I hear the tension in her voice when Martha is here. I know she doesn't like Martha. And I know she has more power in this house than I do. Claire's maturity, her ability to read emotional dynamics through tones of voice and silences, surprised Ronald. He had underestimated his daughter for too long. No one is sending Martha away, Ronald said, with a firmness that surprised himself. Not without us talking first. The three of us. You, me, and Olivia. As a family. But Olivia doesn't want to be my family, Claire said, with a sadness that broke Ronald's heart. She wants to be my dad's wife. It's different. Ronald had no answer to that, because once again, Claire had touched upon a painful truth he had been avoiding confronting. When Ronald left Claire's room that night, he felt emotionally exhausted but also strangely lighter, as if he had finally begun to carry the weight he had been fleeing for years. He found Olivia in the living room, flipping through a magazine without really reading it. I talked to her, Ronald said, sitting beside his wife. And you were right, Martha told Claire about Eliza, but not in a manipulative way, in an honest, beautiful way, in a way I never managed to do. Olivia closed the magazine. So you're going to keep her here, even knowing she withheld important information? I don't know yet, Ronald admitted. I need to talk to her. I need to understand the whole story, but Olivia, I realized something today. What? That Claire is right when she says you don't want to be her family. You want to be my wife. And these two things aren't mutually exclusive, but you treat them as if they were. Olivia felt her face burn. That's not fair, Ronald. I'm not attacking you, he said gently. I'm just saying that perhaps all of us, myself included, need to rethink our roles in this house, because the way it is, it's not working. Olivia remained silent. Part of her wanted to argue, defend herself, explain how much she had tried. But another part, the honest part she rarely accessed, knew Ronald was right. I don't know how to be her mother, Ronald, Olivia finally admitted. I try, but she doesn't let me in. Because you try to be a mother before being a friend, before being a partner. Claire doesn't need another mother. Eliza was and always will be her mother. Claire needs someone who is present, who listens to her, who believes in her. Like Martha does, Olivia said bitterly. Like Martha does, Ronald confirmed. And perhaps instead of seeing Martha as a threat, we can see her as an example. That night, as Manchester prepared for another cold day, the three most important women in Ronald Wellington's life were awake, each dealing with her own demons. Claire, in her room, silently prayed that Martha wouldn't be taken out of her life. Martha was more than a caregiver, more than an instructor. She was living proof that Claire could have a bright, independent future, full of possibilities. Without Martha, Claire feared returning to being the fragile girl everyone pitied. Olivia, in her king-size bed, fought conflicting feelings. She knew she was being unfair to Martha, but she couldn't control the jealousy she felt. Every smile Claire gave Martha was a smile she didn't give her. Every achievement Claire celebrated with Martha was an achievement Olivia hadn't facilitated, and that hurt more than she was willing to admit. And Martha, in her small apartment, looked at the photo of Eliza she kept in her drawer. She had promised to take care of Claire, and she was fulfilling that promise in the best way she knew how, but now that the secret was revealed, she feared everything would fall apart. She feared Ronald would see her as manipulative. She feared Olivia would use this information to remove her from Claire's life. But most of all, Martha feared Claire would feel betrayed, that she would think their entire connection was based on an old promise and not on genuine affection. The next morning, Ronald called Martha and asked her to come to the mansion that afternoon. He said they needed to have a serious conversation, all together. Martha agreed, her voice calm but her heart heavy. At 5 in the afternoon, Martha arrived at the Wellington mansion. Mrs. Nelson greeted her with a worried smile, as if sensing the storm that was to come. In the living room, Ronald, Olivia, and Claire were already waiting. Claire was sitting on the sofa, her hands clasped in her lap, visibly nervous. Olivia stood near the window, her arms crossed in a defensive posture. Ronald was in the center of the room, trying to maintain a neutral expression. "Martha," Ronald said when she entered, "thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." Martha sat in the armchair Ronald indicated, her hands resting calmly on the armrests. She waited. She knew this moment would come sooner or later. "I'll be direct," Ronald began. "Olivia told me about you and Eliza, about your friendship, about the promise you made." Martha nodded. "It's true." "Why didn't you tell me this when you applied for the position? Why did you hide this information?" "Because I was afraid you wouldn't hire me," Martha replied, honestly. "Afraid you would think I had ulterior motives. Afraid you would think I wanted to replace Eliza in some way." "And do you want to?" Olivia asked from the window. "Replace Eliza?" Martha turned her face towards Olivia. "No. One can replace Eliza, Mrs. Olivia. She was unique, special, a force of nature. I would never presume to take her place." "But you do," Olivia insisted. "You occupy the place of the mother who should teach Claire about the world, about how to deal with disability, about how to be strong. "No," Martha said, firm but gentle. "I occupy the place of the one Eliza asked to be there when she couldn't. It's different." Claire, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. "You're talking about me as if I'm not here, as if I were an object to be disputed." Everyone fell silent, surprised. "Claire," Ronald began. "No, Dad, let me talk." Claire turned her face in the approximate direction of each person in the room, as if she could see them. "You want to know the truth. The truth is that Martha is the only person who treats me as if I were normal. Not special, not pitiful, normal. She challenges me, holds me accountable, makes me step out of my comfort zone. And do you know why? Because she knows I can. Because she is living proof that one can." Martha felt her eyes fill with tears. "Olivia tries to be nice to me, I know that. But she sees me as a problem to be solved, as something that stands in the way of her perfect marriage with my dad." Claire took a deep breath. "And you, Dad, you love me. I know you do. But you love me with so much fear that sometimes it seems like you'd prefer I had never been born." The silence that followed was absolute. Ronald felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Olivia paled, and Martha, even without seeing, felt the pain emanating from every corner of that room. "Claire, I would never—" Ronald began, his voice breaking. "I know you don't consciously think that," Claire interrupted, softer now. "But I feel it. I feel it in the way you avoid talking about my mother. I feel it in the way you hide in your work. I feel it in the way you look at me and see the person you lost, not the person who is here in front of you." Ronald sat down heavily, his legs no longer able to support him. Everything Claire said was true, painfully true. "And what about you?" "Martha?" Olivia asked, her voice trembling. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Martha stood, dignified even in vulnerability. "I have no defense, Mrs. Olivia, because I committed no crime. I loved Eliza as a friend. I promised to take care of Claire, and I have been fulfilling that promise in the best way I know how. If that is wrong, then I am guilty. But looking at Claire today, seeing the confident and independent girl she is becoming, I cannot regret it." "So, you're not leaving?" Claire asked hopefully. Martha turned towards the girl. "That doesn't depend on me, little star. It depends on your father and Mrs. Olivia." All eyes turned to Ronald. His face was in his hands, trying to process everything. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes were red, but his voice was firm. "Martha stays," he said, "because Claire is right, because Martha is doing for my daughter what I should have done a long time ago, and because if Eliza trusted her, I will trust her too." Olivia felt the ground give way beneath her feet. She had lost. She hadn't managed to push Martha away. She hadn't managed to gain the control she so desired. But when she looked at Claire, she saw something that made her stop. The girl was smiling, a true smile, full of relief and happiness. And for the first time, Olivia realized it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about giving Claire what she needed. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was time for Olivia to stop fighting Martha and start learning from her. The meeting ended with more questions than answers, but also with something that hadn't existed before: honesty. The masks had fallen, the truths had been spoken. And now, for better or worse, everyone would have to deal with the consequences. That night, for the first time in a long time, Claire slept in peace. The weeks that followed the confrontation in the living room brought a silent but profound transformation. It was as if the Wellington mansion had taken a deep breath after years of holding it and was now learning a new rhythm of existence. Ronald began leaving the office earlier. Not every day, but 3-4 times a week, he would arrive home before dinner. At first, he didn't quite know what to do with this extra time. He would sit in the library, pretend to read, observe Claire and Martha working in the garden. But little by little, timidly, he began to approach. It was on a Tuesday, 2 weeks after the big conversation, that Ronald finally crossed the invisible line he himself had drawn between himself and his daughter. Claire and Martha were in the herb garden, replanting the herbs that had grown too large. Ronald came out of the house, hands in his pockets, and simply stood there watching. "Hi, Dad," Claire said, noticing his presence by the sound of his footsteps on the gravel. "Want to help?" Ronald hesitated. He was a man of concrete and steel, not of earth and leaves, but there was something in Claire's invitation, something hopeful and vulnerable, that made him say yes. Martha smiled, stepping back a little to give them space. "I'll go get more potting mix from the garage. You two carry on here." And so, for the first time in 12 years, Ronald and Claire were alone, working side by side in silence. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, but a contemplative one. Ronald followed Claire's instructions, who patiently explained where to place his hands, how to feel the texture of the soil, how to identify the roots. "You're good at this," Ronald said, genuinely impressed. "Martha taught me," Claire replied, her nimble hands separating a mint seedling. "She says gardening is like life. You can't control everything, but you can create the right conditions for things to grow." Ronald paused, looking at his daughter, really looking, perhaps for the first time, without the filter of pain and guilt. Claire had her mother's brown hair, but the shape of her face was his. The concentrated way she frowned when focused, that was pure Ronald. But the serenity, the wisdom that seemed beyond her 12 years, that was something Claire had cultivated herself with Martha's help. "Claire," Ronald said, putting down the trowel. "I'm so sorry." Claire stopped planting. "Why?" "For having been so absent, for having let my fear be greater than my love, for having made you feel like a burden when in fact you are the best thing that ever happened to me." Claire was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was choked. "You never said that before. I know, and I should have said it every day since you were born." Claire dropped the seedling she was holding and turned towards her father. Ronald hugged her, pressing her against his chest with an urgency that surprised them both. And there, with hands dirty with earth and the smell of mint in the air, father and daughter cried together for the first time. When Martha returned with the potting mix, she found the two still embracing. She said nothing, just smiled to herself. That was what Eliza would have wanted. Not for Martha to replace paternal love, but to facilitate it, to build bridges where there had once been chasms. Meanwhile, Olivia fought her own internal battles. Seeing the growing connection between Ronald and Claire awakened contradictory feelings in her. On one hand, she was happy. After all, that's what she had always said she wanted, for Ronald to be more present, to forge bonds with his daughter. But on the other hand, she felt increasingly out of place, as if she were the only one who couldn't find her role in that new family configuration. It was Mrs. Nelson who noticed first. The housekeeper, with her decades of wisdom living in that house, observed everything in silence. One morning, as Olivia drank coffee alone in the kitchen, Nelson approached. "May I say something, Mrs. Olivia?" Olivia looked up, surprised. Mrs. Nelson rarely initiated conversations that weren't about household matters. "Of course, Nelson. You're trying very hard," the housekeeper said, drying her hands on her apron. "But you're trying in the wrong way." Olivia became defensive. "What do you mean?" "You want Claire to like you the way she likes Martha, but it's not by doing the same things Martha does that this will happen. You need to find your own way." "And what would that way be?" Olivia asked, genuinely lost. Mrs. Nelson sat in the chair next to her, a rare gesture of intimacy. "Martha teaches Claire about the world outside, about independence, about being strong. But do you know what Claire doesn't have? Someone to teach her about beauty, about feeling beautiful, about being a woman." Olivia blinked, processing. "Claire is 12, Nelson. She's a child. A child who's becoming a young lady," Mrs. Nelson corrected, "and who never had a mother to teach her these things. Martha is wonderful, but she's also blind. She can't teach about colors, about matching clothes, about getting ready. But you can." Olivia remained silent, considering. She had never thought of that. She had always assumed Claire didn't care about these things because she never mentioned them. But perhaps Claire didn't mention them precisely because she thought these things weren't for her. "Do you think she'd like to learn about those things?" "Why don't you ask?" Mrs. Nelson suggested with a wise smile. That afternoon, Olivia found Claire in her room, organizing her Braille books. She knocked on the door before entering. "Claire, can we talk?" Claire turned her face towards her stepmother, visibly surprised. Olivia rarely went up to her. "Room." "Of course. Do you want to sit down?" Olivia sat on the bed, nervous. She wasn't sure how to start. "I was thinking, have you ever thought about changing your look? I mean, your hair, your clothes?" Claire frowned, confused. "Why? Is there something wrong with how I am?" "No, no," Olivia hastened to correct. "There's nothing wrong. You're beautiful. But have you ever thought about trying different things? Letting your hair grow longer? Wearing clothes with different textures? Maybe a little light makeup?" Claire was quiet, considering. "I never really thought about it. I can't see myself in the mirror, so I always thought it didn't make a difference." "But it does," Olivia said with genuine gentleness in her voice. "Not because you need to see yourself, but because you need to feel yourself, to feel beautiful, confident, feminine. And you don't need to see for that." Claire tilted her head, intrigued. "How so?" "Well, for example, you know when you wear a soft outfit that fits well? You feel different, don't you? More comfortable. The same goes for beautiful clothes. They make you feel special even if you don't see them." Claire considered Olivia's words. No one had ever talked to her about this. Martha taught her about independence and capability. Ronald treated her like an unbreakable princess, but no one had ever treated her like a girl who might want to feel beautiful. "Could you teach me?" Claire asked shyly. Olivia felt something warm in her chest. It was an opening. Small, perhaps, but real. "I'd love to." And so a new dynamic began. On Saturday mornings, while Martha took Claire to the urban mobility program, Olivia would pick her up on the way back and they would spend the afternoon together. They went shopping and Olivia described each piece of clothing with rich detail, the fabric's texture, the drape, the colors. She explained color coordination through concepts Claire could understand, warm and cool colors, harmonizing tones, contrasts. Claire discovered she loved fabrics with interesting textures, velvet, linen, silk. Olivia helped her assemble a wardrobe where each piece had a braille tag describing its color and style. They created a system where Claire could dress herself and still be sure she was well coordinated. But it was when Olivia taught Claire about skin and hair care that something truly changed between them. Sitting in the bathroom of Olivia's suite surrounded by beauty products, Olivia described each one, its scent, its texture, what it was for. "This is a facial moisturizer," Olivia explained, putting a little on Claire's hand. "Feel the scent. It's lavender, and the texture is light, not greasy. You apply it like this, in circular motions." Claire followed the instructions, delighted by the sensory experience. "And does it make a difference?" "It makes you feel good about yourself," Olivia replied, "and that's what matters." Over time, these afternoons became sacred for both of them. Olivia stopped seeing Claire as the stepdaughter she never asked for, and began to see her as a unique, interesting person with her own tastes and preferences. And Claire, in turn, discovered that Olivia had valuable knowledge and skills that complemented her in ways Martha couldn't. Ronald observed these changes with a mixture of relief and admiration. His family, which for so long had seemed like a collection of people living in the same house without truly connecting, was finally becoming exactly that, a family. But it wasn't all roses. There were difficult moments, setbacks, arguments, like when Olivia suggested that Claire should consider experimental surgery that could partially restore her vision, and Claire responded firmly that she didn't want to, that she was happy being who she was. "But you don't even know what you're missing," Olivia argued, frustrated. "And you don't know what it's like to live without sight," Claire replied, with disconcerting maturity. "You think I'm missing something. I think I'm living differently. And that's okay." It was Martha who mediated that discussion, explaining to Olivia that Claire's disability wasn't something to be cured, but to be accepted and adapted. That suggesting experimental surgeries was, even unintentionally, sending the message that Claire was broken and needed to be fixed. "But I just want the best for her," Olivia said with tears in her eyes. "And the best for her," Martha replied, gentle but firm, "is to accept who she is." not who you think she should be. That conversation marked a turning point for Olivia. She realized that, even with the best intentions, she still carried internalized prejudices. She still saw Claire's blindness as something to be overcome, rather than a neutral characteristic of who she was. It was difficult to deconstruct that, but with Martha's help, who patiently explained, answered questions, shared her own journey, Olivia began to understand. Meanwhile, the relationship between Ronald and Claire continued to deepen. They created new rituals. Every Thursday evening, Ronald read to Claire. Not audiobooks, but his own voice, reading stories he himself chose. Sometimes they were literary classics, sometimes articles about architecture he found interesting, sometimes just funny news from the newspaper. Claire loved these moments, not so much for the stories themselves, but for having her father's full attention, for hearing his voice, his comments, his laughter, for feeling that finally he was present. "Dad," Claire said one of those nights, "do you regret having me?" The question caught Ronald completely off guard. He closed the book he was reading. "Why do you ask that?" "Because I heard you and Olivia talking once. You said your life would have been different if I hadn't been born." Ronald felt his heart break. He remembered that conversation. It was on a difficult night when he and Olivia were arguing about money, responsibilities, about how their lives had changed since the marriage. He had said, in a moment of weakness, that sometimes he wondered what his life would be like if Eliza was still alive. "Claire," Ronald said, sitting on the bed beside his daughter, "I don't regret having you. Never. You were and always will be the best thing that ever happened to me, but I do regret not having been the father you deserved, for having let the pain of losing your mother prevent me from enjoying the gift of having you. But would you wish she were here instead of me? It's not instead of you, daughter. I would wish she were here with you, with us, forming the family she dreamed of." Ronald took a deep breath. "Your mother died giving you to me. And for a long time I carried that as guilt. I thought I had to choose between the two of you, that loving you meant betraying her memory, but I was wrong." "How do you know you were wrong?" "Because Martha showed me. She made me see that loving you is honoring your mother's memory, that giving you a full, happy, independent life is exactly what Eliza wanted, and that I was wasting the chance to know the incredible person you are by being stuck in the past." Claire leaned towards her father, resting her head on his shoulder. "Do you think my mother would be proud of me?" "I'm absolutely sure," Ronald said, kissing the top of his daughter's head. "She would be proud of the strong and independent woman you are becoming. And she would be proud of me, too, for finally having woken up and realized the treasure I have." That night, for the first time in a long time, Ronald entered the room that had been Eliza's and that he had kept locked since her death. Olivia had never entered there. It was a sacred space untouched by time. He walked slowly through the room, touching the objects Eliza had left behind. There were books on inclusive education, pamphlets from institutions for visually impaired people, notes on necessary adaptations in the house. Eliza was preparing for Claire's arrival. She was planning to give her everything she would need to live a full life. On the desk, Ronald found a diary. He hesitated before opening it, feeling he was invading Eliza's privacy. But curiosity won. The entries began soon after Eliza discovered her pregnancy. She wrote about her fears, her hopes, her dreams for the daughter to come. And then, a few pages later, the entry that changed everything. "Today the doctors confirmed that our baby will be born visually impaired. Ronald was devastated, but I feel strangely at peace. I met an incredible woman today at the inclusion event, Martha. She has been blind since childhood and is one of the most inspiring people I have ever met. We talked for hours about autonomy, about adaptation, about living a full life without sight. And she made me a promise. If anything happens to me, she will take care of my baby. She will teach her everything she needs to know. She will be her eyes when I cannot be. I don't know why I trust this woman I just met so much. Maybe it's intuition, maybe it's faith. But I know deep in my heart that Martha is part of my daughter's destiny, and that gives me peace. Ronald needs to read this one day. He needs to understand that Martha is not a stranger. She is a gift, a grace, a promise fulfilled. Ronald closed the diary with trembling hands. Tears streamed down his face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were of understanding, of acceptance, of gratitude. Eliza had orchestrated everything. Even without knowing she wouldn't be present, she had arranged for Claire to have what she needed, and Martha, true to her promise, had appeared at the right time. Ronald went downstairs and found Martha in the living room, talking to Olivia about Claire's schedule for the following week. The two turned when they saw him enter. "Martha," Ronald said, his voice choked, "I need to apologize to you." Martha stood up, confused. "Why, Mr. Ronald?" "For having doubted you, for having thought even for a moment that you were here for selfish reasons. I found Eliza's diary. I read about the promise you made, and I understood that you are not just Claire's caregiver. You are part of the plan Eliza made for her, and I am eternally grateful that you honored that promise." Martha felt her eyes fill with tears. "I loved Eliza like a sister, and I love Claire like a daughter. It wasn't difficult to keep the promise. It was an honor." Ronald approached and, to everyone's surprise, hugged Martha. "Thank you for being what I couldn't be. Thank you for giving my daughter what I didn't know how to give." "You are giving it now," Martha said with a smile, "and that's what matters." Olivia watched the scene with mixed emotions. Part of her still felt jealous, still struggled against the insecurity of not being as important as Martha in Claire's life. But another part, the part that was growing and transforming, recognized that it wasn't about competition. It was about a support network. Martha, Ronald, herself, all had different but equally important roles in Claire's life. "Martha," Olivia said, surprising herself, "I also need to thank you for showing me that loving Claire doesn't mean replacing who she lost. It means adding, summing, creating something new." Martha smiled, extending her hand towards Olivia. Olivia took it, and the two women looked at each other, or in Martha's case, felt each other, with newfound mutual respect. "We'll manage," Martha said, "all of us, because Claire deserves it." And at that moment, in the living room of the Wellington mansion, three imperfect adults made a silent pact to do their best for that extraordinary girl who had brought them together in such unexpected ways. Upstairs, in her room, Claire heard everything, not intentionally, but because she had learned to pay attention to the sounds of the house. And for the first time since she could remember, she felt something she thought was impossible, a real family. Perhaps it wasn't the traditional family other children had. Perhaps it was complicated, patched up, full of painful stories and scars still healing. But it was hers, and for the first time that seemed to be enough. The next morning, something extraordinary happened. Claire came down for breakfast and found everyone sitting at the table: Ronald, Olivia, Martha, and even Mrs. Nelson, who usually ate in the kitchen. "What's happening?" Claire asked, confused. "It's a family meeting," Ronald said. "And you are at the center of it." Everyone spent the morning talking about Claire, her needs, her dreams, her fears, but also about how each person could contribute. Ronald committed to being more present. Olivia proposed to teach Claire about things only a woman could teach. Martha would continue to be the bridge to autonomy, and Mrs. Nelson, with her maternal and direct way, would be the emotional anchor when everyone else failed. Claire listened to everything with tears streaming down her face. They weren't tears of sadness, but of a joy so profound that she couldn't express it in words. "Thank you," was all she could say. "Thank you for seeing me." And at that moment everyone understood. Claire didn't need eyes to see. She saw with her heart. And what she saw there, at that breakfast table, was an imperfect but genuine family trying to do their best. It was a beginning. Not a happy ending, because real stories don't have such simple endings. But it was a new beginning. And sometimes new beginnings are even more valuable than first chances, because they come with wisdom, with scars that teach, with mistakes that transform, and with the certainty that this time they will do things differently. 6 months had passed since that transformative breakfast, and the Wellington mansion breathed a harmony that seemed almost fragile in its newness. Autumn arrived in Manchester, bringing its golden leaves and melancholic afternoons, and with it, changes no one had anticipated. Claire was growing, not just in inches, though that was also true, but in confidence, in autonomy, in dreams. Having just turned 13, she already knew how to take the bus to school alone, already had friends who visited her at home, and was already talking about wanting to study music at university. The shy, withdrawn girl Martha had found 3 years ago had transformed into a vibrant teenager, full of opinions and desires, and it was precisely this transformation that brought the first seismic shift in the new family structure. It all began one Saturday morning. Claire was in the living room using the adapted cell phone she had received for her birthday when she let out an excited exclamation. "Dad! Olivia! Come see!" Ronald and Olivia hurried down, concerned by the urgent tone. They found Claire radiant, holding the phone as if it were a treasure. "What is it, daughter?" Ronald asked. "Martha was selected for an exchange program," Claire exclaimed. "She's going to teach at a university in Ireland for 6 months. How incredible!" The silence that followed was heavy. Ronald and Olivia exchanged worried glances. 6 months? Olivia repeated. "She's leaving for 6 months?" "Yes, it starts next month. She just told me by message. She's super excited." Claire didn't seem to notice the tension that had settled in the room. It must be an incredible opportunity for her. "And you?" Ronald asked carefully. "How do you feel about this?" It was only then that Claire paused to process. The animation on her face gave way to a thoughtful expression. I'm going to miss her a lot, but I'm also happy for her. It's an incredible career opportunity." But when Claire went up to her room, Ronald and Olivia could hear through the closed door the muffled sound of sobs. Claire was crying. "She's not ready," Olivia said, worried. "She's saying she is, but she's not." "Would she ever be?" Ronald asked, more to himself than to his wife. Martha arrived at the mansion that afternoon, and the tension was palpable. Claire tried to maintain an animated facade, but anyone who knew her well would notice the effort behind the smile. "So," Martha said, sitting beside Claire on the sofa, "you heard the news." "I did. And it's wonderful, Martha. You deserve it." "Thank you, little star. But I need to know, how are you really?" Claire hesitated, her defenses beginning to yield. "Scared," she finally admitted. "I know it sounds selfish, but what if I need you?" "You won't need me," Martha said with conviction. "Do you know why? Because you already have everything you need inside you. I just helped you discover it." "But, Claire, listen. When I arrived here 3 years ago, you were afraid to cross the living room alone. Today you take the bus, go to school, have friends, participate in activities. You don't need me anymore the way you used to." "But I still want you here," Claire said, her voice breaking. "I want to be here too," Martha replied emotionally, "but sometimes the best way to love someone is to give that person space to fly alone. And you are ready to fly, Claire. You are more than ready." Ronald, who was observing the conversation from across the room, felt his heart clench. He recognized in that dialogue echoes of his own insecurities. He too was afraid of losing Martha, not because he needed her personally, but because she was the glue that held everything together. Or at least, that's what he thought. "What if she regresses?" Ronald asked, approaching. "What if without you here she becomes afraid again?" Martha turned her face towards Ronald. "Then you will be here to support her. You, Olivia, Mrs. Nelson. Claire has a support network now. She doesn't depend only on me. But you're special," Claire insisted, "and I will continue to be. Special even from afar. I'll call every week, I'll send messages, I'll be a click away, and when I come back, I'll want to hear about all the incredible things you achieved without me." Claire remained silent, processing. It was difficult, but deep down, she knew Martha was right. She had grown, changed, strengthened, and part of that strengthening was precisely learning to walk without the lighthouse that had guided her for so long. "You'll come back, right?" Claire asked, with childlike vulnerability. "I'll come back," Martha promised. "I always come back for those I love." The weeks leading up to Martha's departure were a mix of preparation and farewell. Martha created detailed guides for Claire, routines, emergency contacts, audio tutorials for situations they hadn't yet practiced together. She also spent time with Ronald and Olivia, guiding them on how to support Claire without stifling her, how to challenge without pressuring, how to be present without replacing. "Claire is stronger than you imagine," Martha said in one of those conversations. "But she needs you to believe that too." "How do we do that?" Olivia asked, genuinely curious. "By letting her make mistakes, by letting her fall and get back up, by letting her make decisions even if they're wrong." Martha paused. "The worst thing you can do now is treat her as if she'll break without me, because then she'll start believing that too." Ronald absorbed every word, as if they were instructions for a complex construction project. In a sense, they were. Raising a daughter, he was discovering, was far more challenging than erecting any skyscraper. The day of departure arrived on a grey, cold Saturday morning. The airport was busy, full of hurried people and emotional goodbyes. Claire insisted on going, and Ronald and Olivia accompanied her. At the moment of farewell, Claire hugged Martha tightly, as if wanting to memorize every detail of that embrace. "Thank you," Claire whispered, "for everything, for teaching me to see without eyes." Martha smiled through her tears. "Thank you for letting me be part of your journey. You taught me as much as I taught you. Promise you'll tell me everything about Ireland?" "I promise. And you promise you'll tell me about all your adventures here?" "I promise." A final hug, and then Martha left, leaving behind a family she had helped build, and taking with her the certainty that her work there, for now at least, was complete. On the way back from the airport, the car was silent. Claire looked out the window, even though she couldn't see the landscape, as if trying to feel the change in the air. "It's going to be okay," Ronald said, more to himself than to Claire. "I know," Claire replied, and to his surprise, she seemed to believe it. The first few days without Martha were strange. The house seemed quieter, even though the noise level was the same. Claire maintained her routine, but there was a melancholy in the air that everyone felt but no one commented on. It was Olivia who broke the pattern. One Thursday evening, she entered Claire's room with a proposal. "How about we do something different tomorrow, something you've always wanted to do but never did?" Claire thought for a moment. "There's a botanical garden here in Manchester. They say it has an incredible greenhouse full of plants with different textures and scents. I've always wanted to go." "Then let's go tomorrow," Olivia said, determined. "The three of us, a family adventure." And that's exactly what they did. On Saturday, Ronald, Olivia and Claire spent the entire afternoon at the Manchester Botanical Garden. They walked along the paths, touched the plants in the greenhouse, had a picnic on the lawn. It wasn't perfect. Claire stumbled a few times, got frustrated when she couldn't identify all the plants, and at one point declared she wanted to leave. But then Ronald found a plant that had velvety flowers and a sweet scent. He guided Claire's hand to the flower, and with a patience that surprised even himself, described every detail. "Do you know what this reminds me of?" Claire said, smiling. "It reminds me of the mint we planted. Together. Do you remember?" "I remember," Ronald said, moved. "And it's still there, growing strong." "Like me," Claire said, with a wisdom that went beyond her 13 years. That night, when Claire went to sleep, Olivia and Ronald stayed in the living room, drinking wine and talking. "She's coping better than I expected," Olivia commented. "Because Martha prepared her," Ronald replied. "Not just to live without sight, but to live without depending on anyone. Not even her. Do you think we can manage to continue her work?" Ronald thought carefully before answering. "I think we don't need to continue her work. We need to do our own work, to be the parents Claire needs, not attempts to copy Martha." Olivia nodded, recognizing the wisdom in her husband's words. "You know, I spent so much time being jealous of Martha that I forgot to enjoy Claire, to really get to know her. And now I want to make up for lost time." Olivia paused. "She told me she wants to learn to play the piano. I was thinking of hiring a private tutor." "That would be incredible," Ronald said, smiling. "And I was thinking of taking her to visit one of my construction sites, to show her how we build skyscrapers. She's always shown curiosity about my work. And so, little by little, Ronald and Olivia found their own ways to connect with Claire. They weren't Martha's methods. They didn't have the same technical expertise, but they had something equally valuable: genuine love and real presence. Weeks turned into months. Martha called religiously every week, and Claire shared her news with enthusiasm: the piano lessons she was loving, the visit to the construction site where her father worked, the birthday party Olivia had organized with all her school friends. "You're doing great, little star," Martha said proudly. "You're flying exactly as I knew you would." "I miss you," Claire always replied. "I miss you too. But I'm happy here doing what I love, and I'm happy because I know you're doing well there." But it wasn't all roses. There were difficult moments, like when Claire had her first period and panicked because she didn't know how to handle it alone. Olivia, with a delicacy that surprised them both, guided her through the process, explaining everything with patience and affection. "Martha taught me about independence," Claire said later, as Olivia helped her. "But you're teaching me about being a woman. It's different, but it's equally important." Those words were etched in Olivia's heart. For the first time, she felt she had found her place in Claire's life. Not as Eliza's replacement, not as Martha's copy, but as Olivia. Unique and valuable in her own way. Ronald also had his moments, like when Claire asked if she could participate in a weekend camp with the school. His first reaction was to say no. Of course not. It was too dangerous. But then he remembered Martha's words. "Let her fall and get back up. You can go," he said, swallowing his fear. "But let's review all the safety protocols first, okay?" Claire hugged him so tightly that Ronald felt he could fly. "Thank you, Dad, for trusting me." And it was this trust, gained step by step, mistake by mistake, that definitively transformed the family dynamic. Time passed. 4 months, 5 months. Claire continued to grow, learn, conquer, and Ronald and Olivia continued to learn to be the parents she deserved. It was on a stormy night typical of Manchester's winter that the phone rang. It was Martha. "Hi, little star." "Martha, it's not your day to call. Did something happen?" "It did. Something good. My program here has been extended. They want me to stay another 6 months." There was silence on the other end of the line. Ronald and Olivia, who were in the living room with Claire, tensed up. That's great, Martha," Claire said, and to everyone's surprise, she genuinely seemed happy. "You deserve it. But what about you? Are you okay with that?" "I am," Claire replied, and there was genuine conviction in her voice. "I'll miss you, of course, but I'm fine. I have my dad. I have Olivia. I have my friends, my music. I'm fine." "You've grown so much, Claire," Martha said, her voice choked. "I'm so proud of you. You taught me to grow, not to be afraid to fly." When Claire hung up the phone, she had tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. Ronald hugged her. "Are you sure everything's okay?" "Yes, Dad. I know I'll miss her. But I also know I'm okay, that I have you, that I learned everything she had to teach me." Claire paused. "Martha was always my lighthouse. She guided me when I was lost. But a lighthouse isn't meant to stay close forever. It's meant to show the way until you learn to navigate on your own." And I learned. Olivia, who was listening to everything, felt tears stream down her face. She approached and hugged Claire from behind, and the three of them stayed like that, intertwined, an imperfect but genuine family. "You know we love you very much, don't you?" Olivia said. "I know," Claire replied, "and I love you too, all of you. Martha, for having been my lighthouse. You, for having become my safe harbors." That night, after Claire went to sleep, Ronald and Olivia stayed awake, talking. "She really has grown," Olivia said, marveling. "Remember how she was when Martha arrived?" "I remember, scared, insecure, dependent." Ronald smiled. "And look at her now, confident, independent, full of dreams. Martha did an amazing job. She did. But you know what I find most incredible is that she prepared us too. She taught us to be the parents Claire needed. And then she gave us space to be that." Olivia nodded. "She's wise. She knew exactly when to arrive and when to step away." And us? Are we ready to continue on our own? Olivia thought for a moment. I think Claire showed today that she's ready, so we have no choice but to be ready too. The following months proved that Claire was indeed ready. She passed an important test at the music school. She performed in a public recital for the first time. She began teaching mobility classes to younger children in the program she attended. She was, in every sense, soaring. And Ronald and Olivia were there for every landing and every takeoff. They weren't perfect, they made mistakes. Sometimes they overprotected, other times they underprotected. But they were present. They were trying. And that, they discovered, was enough. When Martha finally returned a year after her departure, she found a transformed Claire. Not just physically, she had grown several inches, but emotionally. There was a maturity in her, a confidence that hadn't existed before. The reunion was emotional. Claire hugged Martha tightly, but not with desperation. It was a reunion hug between equals, not of a dependent with a savior. "Let me tell you everything," Claire said, animated, and she spent hours telling about her achievements, her overcome fears, her new passions. Martha listened to everything with a smile on her face and tears of pride in her eyes. Her work was complete. Claire no longer needed her in the same way, and that was exactly as it should be. That night, after Claire went to sleep, Martha talked with Ronald and Olivia. "You did an incredible job," she said sincerely. She's complete, happy, fulfilled." "You planted the seeds," Ronald said. "We just watered them." "No," Martha corrected. "You did much more than water. You gave her love, structure, presence. You gave her a real family. And you will always be part of this family," Olivia said. "No longer as Claire's caregiver, but as what? An older sister, a mentor, a dear friend?" Martha smiled. "As all of that. And as the person who has the privilege of seeing Claire become everything she can be." A few months later, on a spring afternoon, Claire gave a special performance in her school auditorium. It was a piano recital, her first major solo. The audience was packed, classmates, teachers, family. In the front row, side by side, were Ronald, Olivia, and Martha. Three people who, through such different paths, had become essential in the life of an extraordinary girl. When Claire began to play, her fingers danced across the keys with breathtaking confidence. She played a piece she herself had composed, called "The Lighthouse and the Storm." It was a song that started softly, almost melancholically, representing darkness and fear. But little by little it gained strength, intensity, transforming into something powerful and luminous. In the end, when the last notes echoed through the auditorium and applause erupted, Claire stood up and took a bow. And then, with the naturalness of someone who knows exactly who she is and where she stands, she walked to the edge of the stage and said, "I dedicate this song to three people. To my father, who taught me that it's possible to build beautiful things, even when everything seems to be falling apart. To Olivia, who taught me that family isn't about blood, it's about choice and presence. And to Martha, my lighthouse, who taught me to navigate through storms and discover that I myself can be light." There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. Ronald openly wept, proud of the daughter he had almost let go unnoticed. Olivia held Martha's hand, two women who started as rivals and became allies. And Martha, well, Martha smiled with that serene smile of someone who knows she has fulfilled her purpose. After the recital, everyone went to dinner together at a cozy restaurant in downtown Manchester. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by laughter and shared memories. Claire talked about her plans for the future. She wanted to study music therapy, combining her passion for music with her desire to help other children with disabilities. "You're going to be incredible at it," Martha said with conviction. "I'll look up to you," Claire replied. "You showed me that our disability can be our greatest strength if we know how to use it." "No," Martha corrected. "You discovered that on your own. I just lit the first light. The rest was all you." When the night ended and everyone said goodbye, there was a sense of completeness in the air. Not an end, but a cycle fulfilled. Claire had found her way, Ronald had found his daughter, Olivia had found her place, and Martha had fulfilled her promise to Eliza. That night, before going to sleep, Claire took her audio recorder, the one Martha had given her years ago, and recorded a message. "Diary, today was a special day. I played my music for a full auditorium and I wasn't afraid. I felt the presence of my father, Olivia, and Martha, and I knew I wasn't alone. I never was. For a long time, I thought my blindness made me different, incomplete. But today I understand that it makes me unique, and that unique isn't synonymous with alone. I have a father who finally learned to truly